Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week. I'm excited for this webinar today on Google Forms. I'll do a quick introduction of myself and then we'll jump right in. My name is Devin Schoening. I am the K-12 Instructional Technology Program Lead, at least as of this minute, in Council Bluffs Schools in Council Bluffs, Iowa. So my primary role has been to help teachers and help students and administrators and kind of everybody in our school community, better understand how to utilize technology in real purposeful ways. So this is a webinar, or at least a form of a webinar that I actually did with staff in my schools a couple weeks ago. And so I hope there's something that you'll pick up from this and learn. So with that, we will get going, and I would encourage you, please, if you have any questions at any point in time, please throw them in the chat. I want to make sure and answer any questions that you have and address any concerns or needs that you have. I have a handful of things that I absolutely want to share and I think you'll enjoy, but I also want to make sure that I'm able to hit on the things that you want to hear too. So we've got about an hour to do that, and I'm hopeful that we can get through. I tend to overplan a little bit, so we'll see how that goes. So anyways, we'll go and get going. I'm going to share my screen here just so we can get moving here. All right, so I'm going to do this one. All right, so Google Forms, what we're really going to look at today are 5 ways to use Google Forms and thinking about Google Forms in a way that maybe we don't traditionally think of them. I think there's a purpose, there's something that makes Google Forms what they are, and people use them for kind of standard uses, and I want to show a few different uses of forms. So our agenda for this morning is really just a welcome, which we've done. Wanted to say hello and glad everybody is here. We will have a quick opening activity that we'll spend just a couple of minutes doing that I think you might enjoy. We'll talk a little bit about what Google Forms are. It's always hard, never know what experiences people have with some of these tools. So I do want to at least go through briefly what Forms is and how you use it. And then we have, some uses of Google Forms that are hopefully going to get us beyond just typical surveys. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. And hopefully we have some time for questions at the end. But again, if you have questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to throw those in the chat and I'll be happy to answer those. So for us to do this quick activity first, for anybody who can, what I'd like you to do is just go to a different browser on your computer, go to a browser tab, and put in the link that's here, this bit.ly link, this little shortened URL link. It is case sensitive, so where there are capital letters, use capital letters. But if you can go over and go to bit.ly/do_forms with capital letters where appropriate, the D, the S, and the F, and take just a few minutes to fill out that form. And we're going to use that as a first example of something that we can do with Google Forms that maybe you haven't thought of before. And it shows a really cool kind of connection with the data that comes back from Forms using what's called an add-on to do some pretty cool things. So if you'll go and do that and fill out that form, we'll take just a couple of minutes to do that. And then we'll come back. So I think I have a 4-minute timer on the slide right now. I don't think we'll need that long. I can kind of see on the back end here how many people have responded. So as soon as you can do that, we'll have about 3 minutes and we'll come back together. If you have questions during that time, please put them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. All right, I see there's a comment about the work computer won't let you go to that site. That's okay. If you can, I'm going to show you what it's going to look like on the back end once people have done that anyway. So it'll be okay. So yeah, I saw one come in. All right. So Eric, it looks like. So they're starting to pop in. It should take just a few seconds. And so please, we got about 2.5 minutes left. So go ahead and fill that out. And again, if you have questions now, is a great time to ask them since we're just kind of waiting for people to get in. So we've got 2 minutes or so left, and then we'll come back and look at this together. And I see 4 of them in, excellent. In this last minute and a half or so, while people do that, if you've already filled it in, if you'd want to put in the chat maybe kind of what you do or where you're at, I'd love to hear that while I've got a minute and a half to wait. Yeah, so Beth, I see a question there about wondering if you can use Drive to actively use forms, kind of personal and business. Yeah, you can. So I flip back and forth between my school account and my personal Gmail account, and that works just fine. You don't really have to, all you have to have is Google Drive to be able to do forms. There's nothing to necessarily download or use, but yeah, it's something that you can flip back and forth between those. I oftentimes share things between my personal account and my school account or vice versa, so that I can access them in both accounts. You know, sometimes what happens when we have school accounts or business accounts in Google, they're a little different than the personal accounts. So we just have to make sure that things look the same. You know, in a personal account, I can't necessarily lock down a form and only allow people within my domain to access them, whereas in a school account, I can do that. So there are just some things that are slightly different in both, but yeah, you can certainly flip back and forth. I know that's something that I do quite a bit. So excellent. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So there are people that have gone in. So if you filled that out, you'll be able to check your email, the email address that you put in there, and you should have something back in that email that kind of gets us going with this little activity too. So we're going to jump back in now, and we're going to come back to that form that I just shared with you in a second. But I do want to go back and kind of start talking about how do we get to forms, what do forms do, and then we can jump into some of the uses of it. So when we say Google Forms, Forms is really just a piece of Google Drive. So whether I have a personal Gmail account or I'm in a domain, in an organization that uses the Google Suite, Forms are in Drive. So when I go to Drive and I go to create a new and I go to more, Google Forms is that first option. You can see it here on the slide. It's the purple option. I tell people a lot that it's in Google Drive, it's really more, it's probably better for us to get comfortable with the icons and the colors than anything else because it's an easy tell. The purple are the forms, the blue are the docs, the green are the sheets, the yellow are the slides. So there are things that we can use to kind of like tell us what those documents are. So that's what Google Forms are. So we go there to access it. And then once you create a Google form, you can do one of two things. You can create a blank form, so you start from scratch, or there are some templates that are in there that you can start from, and they have some questions built in, they have some formatting built in. You're able to edit any of that you want, so it is kind of nice. So if you ever wanted to start, from a template, they do have some in there. What happens is you open the template and you essentially make a copy. It makes a copy of that for yourself. So you'd be able to kind of edit that and make it your own. But going from a template is certainly something that's a good idea sometimes. And I'll show you that in just a second, a live demo too. Once we are inside of Google Forms, there are 11 different question types that we can actually use. The other thing is I think we can be creative in how we use those. Sometimes what happens is we just utilize tools in the way that maybe they were intended to be used. So, you know, I think of a multiple choice question. I have this thought in my head about what a multiple choice question is, where maybe I can use that to do some other things. Maybe it's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but it's a, you know, we've done some things with, you know, choose your own adventure kind of stories, right? Where you go in there and you're just clicking one of those to kind of take me into a different branch of this, what's a form, right? So it's not intended to collect information really. It's about working my way through something. So we want to think differently about those. But the 11 question types, and I think I kind of break these down, yeah. So there are short answer and paragraphs. So both of those types of questions are free response. So people are going to type in their answer. And you can see that in the screenshot of those two, they're very, very similar. They look exactly the same. When the form is used on the live end, so somebody filling in the form, the paragraph text answer box is just going to be a little bigger, but it doesn't really matter. They both can do the same thing. So paragraph and short answer are very, very similar types of questions. Free response, and they're going to be typing that in. There are two other questions that are very similar, multiple choice and drop down. What you can see there is the difference is how it is, how you see it on the user end. Multiple choice questions come in as, you know, I see all the possible responses and I choose the one I want. Whereas a drop down, I'm going to click a little drop down window and all the options are going to come up. I'm going to pick the one that I want or that I think is correct. So those two questions are very, very similar as well. They just look different. Checkboxes is another type of question. This is one where you can allow people to choose all that apply. So they're able to choose they're able to choose all the answers that apply to that question, or even if it's not a question. You know, we'll look at things like this where we've used forms like this with checkbox answers and multiple checkbox grids, which we're going to look at in a second, where maybe we're signing up to bring things for a potluck. You know, something like that where, yeah, I can bring, and there are a list of things, I can bring chips and drinks on this date and something else on this date. So checkbox allows me to check multiple items. File upload does allow you to have a question where people upload an actual file as an answer. So as is shown in kind of the screenshot there, maybe something like upload your resume here, and they upload the actual file there and it's stored for you. Then the person on the back end can see that and download it and view it. So this is perfect for things like images and PDFs and files that might not be like Google Docs, where they're links. So that's a great option for an answer as well. Linear scale and multiple choice grids. These are both kinds of questions that allow you to have, again, a scale. So it can be something like, you know, score this on a 1 to 5. It can be something that goes, you know, strongly disagree to strongly agree, and a scale, and I choose my answer based on a statement. Or I do some sort of self-assessment where I'm looking at myself on that. So that's a linear scale. A linear scale question is one of those. A multiple choice grid is having multiple linear scales in one question. So it's one response place in the form, and I have multiple statements that I'm scoring on the scale, on the same scale. And I'll show you examples of all of these, so please don't worry about that. And then, so this is the example, sorry, of the linear scale question. Again, it's just one, and then the multiple choice grid, which is below, which has 3 different statements, all on the same grid, all with the same components, strongly agree to strongly disagree, and you're choosing all of them within there. Checkbox grid is the one that I spoke of earlier, and here's the example that we've used. It's much like the linear scale and the multiple choice, but you're able to choose all of the options that apply. It's not a single answer. So when we had dates on the left here, and then we have main dish, drinks, sides, desserts, plates, and napkins, I can choose all that apply for me to bring on for those dates. So that's a checkbox grid. Again, it allows me to choose multiple. And then the last question types, the two are date and time, and they're exactly as they sound. It allows the user to put in a date or a time as an answer. So as you're trying to figure out times to meet or some other things, that would be a way to do that. Let's see here. Did I see a question? Yeah, sorry, I missed that. There was a question. Don't see it now though. If there is, please let me know. I don't want to miss that. Okay. So I'm going to go back here, and as I'm in my forms, or as I'm sharing my screen, I'm going to come over and actually create a form, and I just want to show you what that looks like really quickly. So here's what a blank form looks like. And when I start adding in my questions, it's the little plus sign. The drop down here gives me all the different question types. And so this is kind of where we go to put in all of our questions and to set up our form, which we're not going to get too far into today. You know, it's not about creating forms, but I'll be happy to answer questions about that. I do want to actually get to the part where we look at examples of forms, because I think that'll give you more of a jumping off point to actually do some of those things. So I'm going to jump back out of here, but I want to see this is kind of what the basic start from a blank form looks like, and then we'll kind of come back to this as I show you some additional examples of forms too. Okay, Tracy, is it possible to use the answers from the questions to create an if-then second set of questions? Yes, there is. So what that looks like here is I can do it from multiple choice questions, right? So if I have a question here, I'm just going to do something simple. What is your favorite color? And I put in some options. Oh boy. Blue, orange, yellow. Okay, so we'll do that. Now what's going to happen is for each of these, what I can turn on is something that says go to a section based on an answer. And so what you'll notice now is that I don't have any more sections. So over here in my toolbar on the right-hand side, I can say add a section, and I can add as many sections as I want. And then I can say, okay, if the answer is red, what section are we going to? So we call these branched forms. And so what they really do is they take you places based on a particular answer. And I have an example of one of those in here too. So I'll show you what it looks like with some actual answers and questions in there. So yeah, you absolutely can. You can have them kind of do if-thens. Okay. So I'm going to go back over now to my to the slides for today. So that toolbar that I just showed you, we talked about the questions already. If I want to add a question, I just do the little plus sign that gives me a new question into the form. Then I can change it with the drop down with regards to what type of question I want to ask. I can import some questions from past forms. So if I've been using Google Forms already and I have some other forms that have questions, you know, multiple questions that I want to pull into this form and not have to recreate, it'll pull up all my forms for me and I can pull those in. So that's nice. This is for title and description. So this is something you can add in that's not going to be a question, but it is going to add a title and a description in your form. So as they get to a certain place in that form, they're going to see this title and description. There's nothing they do with that, but they do. It's there for information purposes. I can add images in to Google Forms. So sometimes we'll add an image, you know, on top of something, and then there's some questions about it below or something like that. You can add images from multiple locations. So from Google Drive, you can take them from lots of different places. You can add videos to forms from YouTube, sorry. So if you have a link to a YouTube video that you want to put in, have them watch a video before they do something, you can absolutely do that. And then the last little part that I talked about briefly a second ago on this toolbar that shows up on the right, that kind of floats on the right-hand side of the page in Forms, is for sections. And really what this does, it creates different pages for your form. You know, it doesn't section it necessarily on the same page. It's going to create, every time you create a new section, it creates a new page. So in the form, they would click like continue, and it would take them to the next page. Or they would have an answer that based on how they answer a question, it takes them to a particular page as well. Let's see here. All right. So we're going to keep going then with that. Sorry. Back on my screen. Okay. So that's kind of what Forms is in a real brief sense. And I know that we could probably do an entire webinar just on how to create them. But what I really want to do today is look at some different uses of those. So that's what we're going to start now is kind of this, what can I do with Google Forms? So the first thing that you can do is you can collect information. And this is one of probably the most basic ways to use this, is to collect information. So I can use Google Forms as a way to collect email addresses from people, kind of like I did today. I can use it to collect some demographic information. I can use it to collect all kinds of information. It's an easy way to replace paper forms with these Google Forms. And really the reason that that's important, not that we should always replace everything that's paper with digital, but the responses that come in all come in a spreadsheet, as well as in the Google form. And I'll show you that too. So all the responses are going to be in the form, and they're all going to be in a spreadsheet. And once they're in that spreadsheet, I can obviously do all kinds of things with that data. I can sort it, I can filter it, I can share it, I can copy and paste it to other sheets, I can create some additional lists. Like, there are lots of things that I can do with that information once I have it. So that's one of the great things about Google Forms, is that we are able to kind of have that data and then do something with it. So when we look at that, there are a few examples of this I'll show you. So this first one here is a form that we have used in the past when we were trying to collect some information from staff members, and we were trying to collect information about if they had a class website, how were they getting information to kids? And this is a form from a number of years ago now. But what you'll see here is that this has a yes or no question. And based on the answer that they give here, it's going to take me to a part of the form. So, if I click yes, I'm going to go one way. If I click no, I'm going to go another way. So I'm going to click the edit button here just so you can see the back end of that form. So this is what that form looks like. I'm just collecting information here. Do you have a website? Yes or no? And you can see in here, if they do have a website, it's taking them to the section that says, I do have one. If they don't, it's taking them to the section that says, I don't have one. And when they do have it, the questions are different. It's how often are you updating it? What kinds, will you please paste your link in here so we can just see it? So those are the questions for people who have that. If they don't have one, it's why don't you have one? Is there a reason? Do you need some supports? What kinds of things would help you get that done? And so we were able to just collect all that information. And then again, they both, so when they're done with yes, I have one, or no, I don't have one, they both go to the same place, which is section 4, which is questions. Do you have any questions or concerns? And then that information comes to me. So what you'll see is when I click on responses up here in my form, this form was created before responses were here, but I think, let's see, unless I made a copy of it, we'll see what happens here. If I click on here we go. So this is my spreadsheet. So these are all now the links to the websites of people who have them. For those who don't, I've got reasons as to why they don't. I don't know how to create one. I don't know how to create one. I don't know how to create one. So that gives me the information I need to kind of help them moving forward. So that's one example of just collecting information so that we can make some decisions about how to best move forward. Another one, this is a required registration form. We don't use this. It was one that we've kind of tried to create to replicate what they're already doing. But this is one that for us is for our school fee waivers. So if you're going to have a fee waiver, there are forms you need to fill out. And we will mail those forms out and send them out, and sometimes we don't get them back. This is a way to do it digitally. So again, if I look at the back end of this one, you'll see that in here we have the information, we have sections for them. This is an image that's in here of the chart that they use to kind of determine if they qualify or if they don't qualify. So then once they figure that out, this is one of those questions again that kind of branches them. So if they do qualify, it's going to take them to a particular set of questions. If they don't, it's going to take them somewhere else. But really, we just want to have all that information in the back on the back end in the spreadsheet so they can move it into another system. So again, that's just a form that's used to collect information. I just want to get information from people. This is the third example that I'll share with you. And again, it was collecting information about teachers in our district who are using social media. So who are on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram for their classrooms, not necessarily personally, just using them with their classrooms or with their kids or to communicate with parents, whatever that might be. And so we have all this demographic information you can see because we want to be able to then, split that up a little bit. Maybe we can look at that and say, it's really weird that, X percentage of elementary teachers are doing this, but, and X percent of high school teachers. I wonder why that is. So it allows us an opportunity on the back end to dig into that data just a little bit more. And again, that's going to be just one that has, where we're able to kind of filter and use some of that, okay? So those are examples of, again, what I would call just collecting information, which is a perfect reason to use Google Forms, and it's kind of a more basic way to use it, which is great. You can also use it for things like evaluation. So if you want to provide feedback or evaluate the effectiveness of a program or an initiative or a class that's offered or a webinar, that maybe a Google form would be we could use that just to get some quick feedback to evaluate what that looked like, or what improvements we could make. These can be done anonymously, or we can collect email addresses and names. Again, the nice thing about when we do these inside of domains or inside of organizations, there's a little check that I can use, and I'll show you here on mine. I'm in my school account right now, but if I come up and click the settings in a Google form in my school account, I can have it automatically collect their email addresses, and I can restrict it to just people within Council Bluffs schools. And so that sometimes I want to be able to do that. The collect email address makes them sign in with their Council Bluffs email address. With my personal account, I can't necessarily do that. So I require that they, oftentimes have to type in their email address, kind of like you did today. And sometimes they type them in correctly, and sometimes they don't. And if they don't type it in correctly, there's not much I can do. So that's the hard part. That's the one part about the personal account that's a little different. So Beth asks, how do you get to the spreadsheet? So when I'm inside of a form, there's a little button right here that says create spreadsheet. So the first time you create it for each form, it'll say create spreadsheet, and it makes a spreadsheet for you that's stored in Google Drive. Then I can get there by going and clicking this anytime I want inside the form, or I can always just go to my Google Drive and go find that spreadsheet for that form. So they reside inside of Google Drive, and you can search for them and find them just like you do other documents. Yeah, good question. All right, so these are examples then of maybe what evaluation kinds of forms would look like. I did a whole week-long professional learning for Davenport schools for a couple of years. And this was a form that I used to just get some feedback about the sessions that we were offering to these teachers. And so what we did is I would do this at the beginning of the week, and then we would do it again at the end of the week. So like this Google Apps, which is something we focus on pretty heavily, was like, okay, describe your level of proficiency using these tools, basic all the way on up to mastery. And then at the end of the week, we do the same thing to see if there was any growth. There are also questions in this form that are about something they learned, what would I like in future, what is, some feedback about the presenter in terms of the presenter's knowledge or patience or flexibility, whatever that might be. So we built a pretty quick little form here. It's not super long, but we're able to really gather some information and get some evaluation. So this could be used to determine whether or not this was a good idea. Should they have brought me in for the week to do that training for them, or to provide those sessions. So that's one that was a little more evaluative. A job performance feedback. So in our district, we have some opportunities for folks who are in teacher leadership positions who are working with other staff members. This is a form that we use at the end of the year that these teacher leaders send out to the people they have worked with to just get some feedback. It's not, again, maybe evaluative. Maybe evaluative is the wrong term for this, but it is kind of an evaluation. It's something where it's really intended for the person who's in that position to get the feedback. It's not determinant of anything in terms of their job or their pay, so it's not evaluative in that way. But you can certainly use this to get some feedback. And again, you can see all of these linear scale questions with a couple of short answer or paragraph answer ones at the end, just for some typed responses. So again, a form like this takes just a few minutes to fill out, and now I have all kinds of data to come back to me about what that's going to be. So those are ones that again are again evaluation. I'm using scales a lot of times. I'm using maybe performative kinds of feedback. So those are two examples of that I really like. Another one that we can do is peer feedback. And so when I say peer, I'm really thinking about students here, but this could be colleagues, this could be folks working in inside of an organization. It doesn't have to be students, but this particular webinar and these particular slides were with teachers and students in mind. Because what happens, at least for us, students can create forms as well. And they can share those with their peers, they can share those with their teachers, they can share those with people outside of their organization. And then if the teacher is also shared on those, then they're seeing the feedback that kids are giving and receiving also. And so again, this can be done with in lots of different ways, not just within within schools, but this is the example that I have for that. So this is a peer feedback example that we have for speech class. So kids give speeches, and they give, what is it, 6 different kinds of speeches throughout the class. And so what happens is each student prepares this form. So really, they just make it quick. It's one that they're copying and pasting essentially. They don't have to do anything special for their individual form, but they create this form and then they share it with their peers. They share it with the other kids in their class. And then so if I'm receiving that, if a student is giving a speech, I've got this form pulled up for that kid, for my peer. I'm putting in my name as the person who's giving this feedback. I'm giving, what kind of speech is it? Which speech are we on? I'm thinking about their attention getter. I'm thinking about their 3 points that they're addressing. The appropriate transitions. And what you can notice for each of these that include a scale from poor to exceptional, there's also an opportunity for them to write some evidence or share some thoughts or questions or ideas as feedback as well. And so you can see there are a handful of questions that they're just kind of looking at as the speech is being given. And then, lastly, they talk about the conclusion and they submit that. And as they submit that, the student who gave the speech, as soon as they're done, they have all of this feedback, again, back in their form or in a spreadsheet, whichever way they like to look at it, that they can look at and kind of think about their speech a little bit. The teacher is on that as well, so they see all the feedback that students are providing and that students are receiving. And because this is within our domain, each of those comes with an email address too. So it doesn't, none of it is anonymous. I'm not gonna put in a different name or something like that. Sometimes kids do some crazy things. So this is a way to kind of like make sure that that's the person giving the feedback is the person who's on the form. So this is a way, again, that we can give some peer feedback. We can think about how do we give feedback to our colleagues, to our peers, and this is one way to do that. And with this peer speech evaluation form as the example. Okay. Another thing you do is you can use Google Forms as, I'm going to go back. I think there might be a question there. I tried to pause quick. For peer feedback, do we need a roster of emails? So yeah, what they would have to have is as soon as they have that, and for us, like if a teacher uses Google Classroom, for example, they might already have that because everybody's signed up in there and they have their email addresses. But one thing that you can do is once an email, if I'm a teacher and I have an email that I can send to all kids, they can copy and paste those email addresses, and then they can have that. The other thing that they do sometimes in this is even if they're not sharing the form out by email, they might do it with a shortened URL like I did today with that bit.ly. And so they'll use the bit.ly as a way to get them to the form at the beginning as well, so they don't have to worry about emailing all participants. So if they just put in that bit.ly and as they're getting set up for their speech, they could have that up in front of the class and just have them go to that as they're ready. They will sometimes too, because they're doing, every student is giving feedback for every speech, and they're in the same class for the whole semester, they will have the forms saved or bookmarked, so they just access it by a student name, like in a folder in Drive or something. So there are lots of ways to have them kind of save those or bookmark those, so they don't necessarily have to have a whole bunch of emails. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, you just have to have a way for people to get to the form. It doesn't have to be in an email. It can be by a link too. So I hope that helps. If it doesn't, please ask again and I'll figure it out. So you can use it for sign up as well. And when we talk about sign up, that's really about we have events coming up and how do we know who's coming to that event, what's some other information we want to get from that event. And so that's what a sign up might be. This form can be used with anyone inside or outside of your domain. So if you're doing this from a private account, no worries. If you're doing this from an organization account, it can be set up so that anybody can reply. Again, they just have to, the things that they type in, email addresses and such, they have to type in correctly, otherwise it causes a real issue. And then you can customize these forms to send information back to the end user as well, which is kind of nice. I've set up forms before where, again, when they complete the form, it will send them their responses back to them, right? So they have that, so they have evidence that they submitted the form. There are some ways that you can, I just, for webinars that I'm doing in my district, I created the confirmation page, when they submit their form, there's a little link that shows up in the confirmation. So the first thing it says is, thank you so much for signing up for this webinar. Click this link, and the link, when they click it, automatically adds it to their Google Calendar, which is kind of a nice little feature. But again, only works if people read the confirmation. They don't always. If they do and they read it, they've got a nice little thing there to add it to their calendar. So there are ways to customize these to get some information back to the end user as well. So here are a few examples of things where we're talking about signups. One thing that I do is I coach girls basketball as well, and at our beginning of the year, kind of preseason meeting every year, when we get together and the girls come into whatever room it is that we're meeting in, I have again a bit.ly, a shortened URL link up on the screen for them, and they will fill out a quick form for me that gives me their name and their cell phone number and their grade and what are their parents' names, all that information that I might need throughout the season to keep in contact with them. So this allows me to know right away who signed up and who isn't. So we'll go back and try and cross-reference that with, oh, who did we think was coming out that wasn't at the meeting, and reach out to them, plus having all the information that I need throughout the season. So that's a way to have them sign up. This next one is really for instructional coaching. So if teachers or principals or buildings, people in buildings in our district want some supports, these are ways that they can do that. So the first thing they do is select the school that they're in, and then they say, okay, first, am I just looking for something simple? Here's what it is, and then some details. If they're looking for something a little more intense, here's what it is, and give me some details. And then the last one is just kind of like some interesting things that we can help them with that maybe they're not thinking of, and some details. These are not required questions. You can see they don't have the little red asterisk. The little red asterisk says that that's a required question. These are not required because they might, if they choose something from this section, they're not going to do the other two sections. So they're going to sign up for this. They choose a person they want to work with or somebody they're comfortable with, and they submit that. When we do that, we have some things, I've set up some things on the back end of this form also that then kind of routes it to the right person. So if one person's name is entered there, it kind of sends them a message, or they know that their services have been requested. So that's a sign up form for more like I'm requesting some support or requesting some service. This one is the sign up that I use for the webinars that I'm doing in district. And again, it's a very simple form. I'm doing 13 of these webinars is what I've done. I've done 9 so far, and I have 6 more. Or that's not right. I've done 8 so far, and I've got 7 more. They sign up here. It's the same form every time. So I just want to know what school they're from, what grade they teach, who they are, and what their email address is. Now, I have not, I could automatically collect email addresses, but I also share this out with people who are outside of my district. So if someone wanted to join one of my webinars, I share those things on Twitter and elsewhere, and they're welcome to join. And if I limit it, they can't sign up. So I do have them type in their email address here, whereas if I was just doing it for folks in my district, I wasn't even inviting other people, I would do it another way. So that's why I have that form in here. But again, a very, very simple form. But what I then end up with on the back end of this, if I click on the edit button, I'll show you, and I go over to my responses. So first in my responses in the form, this isn't all that handy, right? It just gives me all this information. So I'll go to the spreadsheet, and then what I can do from this spreadsheet is I can know who's coming. I see the questions they have ahead of time, so I can make sure that I hit on those. And then if I want to email this entire group, I just come over here to this column, and I copy and paste all these email addresses, and I send an email to them a day before usually, or the morning of, just as a reminder with their join link, all that information they should have already, but I just want to make sure that they have it again. So that's where I get all that information. It's one of the reasons I have them sign up this way. And then again, if I go to my questions here, I'm going to go to the end. All right, so this is the confirmation message I was talking about. So this is what they get once they submit their form. This pops up for them and says, thank you for signing up. And then I have a little link for them that they click. And when they click that link, it automatically adds this to their Google Calendar. And so I've used a couple of other tools to do that I'd be happy to show you if you want. But that's kind of how I do that, so that it gives them some information as well. So that's a sign up. So a couple of examples of how we can use Google Forms to have people sign up for things. This is an example of those branched forms again. I've shown you a couple of examples of what that looks like. This is one that we've talked about for like a study review and or practice for something. And again, doesn't have to be a school. There are lots of, I think, ways you could use this even within organizations of other types. But these create opportunities for people to review and practice skills and kind of gain some understanding. Using the branch forms means, again, I can have them access different parts of the form based on how they're answering different questions. And so I have a real brief example of what that looks like in this. Oops, I need to go back, sorry. I limit these to 1. So if I come up here, one of the options you have in here is limit to 1. No, I didn't. Interesting. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to come in here. I'm the only one who has taken it, so I'm going to go to this individual, which is me, and I'm going to delete that so that you can see what the form looks like. There we go. So here are my questions on the back end. You can see, which of these graphs is this equation? And you pick that. And then based on if they pick the right or wrong one, they go to a section, right? They got it right or they got it wrong. In this case, so now I can go to the live form, and it will let me. So in this case, if I go ahead and pick this one, which would be incorrect, right? Yes. So if I go to next, it says, no, sorry, that was incorrect. Here's a video that talks about how to figure this out, how to graph something with, graph with slope. See what the slope is and graph it. And so I can watch this little video, and then once they watch the video, then they have some opportunities to practice that in a different way. If I go back, if I go back to the first page again, and 1 equals 4x plus 3, let's see, it's this one, is that right? No. Oops, go back, sorry. It's this one, right? Yeah, okay. So this was correct. It says, good job, you were correct. This is y equals 4x plus 3. Now tell me how you knew that. So they got the right answer. Now it's like, okay, tell me how you knew this. And if they didn't, if they guessed, then they're gonna have a hard time answering this question here. But if they, come in and explain their answer here and then click next, then what it does one more time is just gives them a different kind. So instead of here's your equation, what's the graph? We say, here's the graph. Now what equation matches up with that, and how did you know that? So it's an opportunity within this kind of form to kind of like branch that out and say, yep, you got it right. So we're not going to have you keep practicing the same thing. You got it right. You explained why you got it right. Here's another example. Whereas if you got it wrong, we're going to say, okay, here's some support. Here's a video, or here's something else that can help you better understand that. And then we have them practice that a little more. And then they get another example of that same type of question just to make sure, just to check. And not that they're going to get it after one practice, and that's not the point here. But they would have an opportunity to kind of go back and practice that skill again. So that's a branched form that allows us to really kind of do that and dig into particular skills that people may need more practice with. So we did that one with graphing linear equations. Okay, so before we get to questions, what I also want to do is go back and show you the little activity that we did at the beginning, which I'm sure, as you figured out, was a little Mad Lib. And if you checked your email, you should have had a PDF version of that ad lib sent to you automatically. And I want to show you how we did that. So I go over to my Google Forms, and this is the form that I created for the Mad Lib example. And so all I did was created a bunch of short answer text questions, and I put in, the things that needed to be added, right? A noun, a first name, a verb or action. You can see that they have verb action 1, first name 2. You have to do that to make the back end of this work. And I'm going to show you the spreadsheet and how I make this work in just 1 second, but I wanted you to see that. It does say your first name. I did change this. So when I did this for people in my district, I did have this collect email address thing on so that when they submitted, it automatically would send it to that email address. What happens is if I'm doing that outside of domain, kind of like today, I have to have you email or put in your email. And it looks like if you put it in right, you should have gotten an email. If it wasn't typed in correctly, you probably didn't get an email back that showed that. So this is what it looks like kind of on the back end, the form end of that. I'm going to go over to the responses and go to the spreadsheet to show you what this looks like. So it looks like these are the ones right here, these bottom ones that that people today submitted, right? I can tell by the timestamp, the ones from today, and it didn't automatically collect email addresses. Those email addresses are going to be over to the right now. And so then what I did is I attached it, we kind of meshed it with this, almost like a mail merge. So this is a Google slide that I created. I just changed the size of the slide. I changed the dimensions. So it's not a slide, it's actually a piece of paper. And then I typed in the story that was gonna be with the Mad Lib. And anywhere where I'm gonna have it tied to the form, I just do these little carrots on each side, and I put a piece of text there that's going to tell me what question it relates to in the form. And so every time they filled out a form, it's going to automatically connect that to something in this spreadsheet, or in this Google slide. So in my spreadsheet, you'll see that I have all these, everything came in. And then what we use, this is one of the things that's great about some of the Google products and other places. We just use some things called add-ons. So there's an add-on that I use to make this magic happen, and it's called Autocrat. And what Autocrat does is I open this, and I'll show you kind of the quick version of how this works. Autocrat kind of ties together the answers in this spreadsheet that came from the form and that Google slide that I showed you that had all the little carroted words. And so it's my Google Forms Mad Lib, and I'm just going to go to the edit so you can see what it looks like when I had to set this up. It's pretty easy to set up. It's going to say I have some duplicates, and that's okay. I switched something earlier, so I'm going to go to next. So it's saying, okay, here's the spreadsheet that or the slides that I'm connecting this to. And then these are the questions. So right here down this column, you can see all those little carrots. Those are the same as what I had on the slide. And then on the right, it's saying it maps to what column in this spreadsheet. So, you know, if I look here, it says your first name, this column C, that's going to map. Anytime it sees name 1 in that document, it's going to automatically put whatever's in this column into that space. And so I just map those all the way down, which is great. I say, yep, I want to make this a PDF when I'm done. The title of it is going to be Mad Lib and your first name, which comes again from this spreadsheet. So it's going to be your first name. And then I'm going to put it out as multiple. So it's going to make a different one for each person. It's going to run this every time the timestamp column has something in it. And this last little bit here at the end says it's going to run on trigger, which means every time somebody submits the form, it's going to automatically run. I can also do that differently and run it on a time or do it manually, but I like just having it where it does it automatically for me as soon as that is submitted. So that's kind of a way to do that, which is kind of a cool little thing. I use that for all kinds of merging of information from spreadsheets, and usually it's into just like a Google Doc of some kind. But it's something that we can always go back to. I use that Autocrat thing all the time, and it's kind of one of my go-tos and one of my favorites. Okay, so that takes us back now, and we're kind of to the point here where we have a few minutes, and I am happy to answer any questions that you have or go back and show you something if I went too quickly, or if you have an idea and you're like, hey, I wonder if I can do this. I'm happy to answer any of those questions for any amount of time we have. Okay, Vanessa says this is probably a one step after Google, but similar to Mad Lib. Yeah, so generate an email. Yeah, so there are ways to generate emails. The approval process gets a little tough, but I have an example of a form that we created for, as we were trying to rethink travel in our district, so people who were going to conferences or travel, and that travel had to be approved by multiple people, right? So their direct supervisor and then another person. And so I did create a form that did that, and it notified people along the way. But I had to use a third-party add-on in Google Forms, and I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. I'd be happy to help you out or connect with you and share that with you. But I can't remember the name of that off the top of my head. So it is possible to do some of that approval process in Forms. But I would tell you that it's a little difficult. I mean, it's not super easy. But as I messed with it that day, I created the form for that one in a couple of hours in a day. So it wasn't terrible, but it did take some thinking. I had to Google a couple of things. I had to find the right add-on. But yeah, it's possible for sure. Do you think you will be doing a webinar on how to create a Google Doc? I can. I would be happy to. I don't know if that's something that would be useful and that people would like to see. I'd be happy to do it. You know, Google Docs and Google Apps, really. You know, Docs is one of those terms that kind of gets thrown away around as something that is. Docs is one specific thing, right? So when I say Google Docs, I mean word processing documents. When I say Google Drive, that's the place where kind of all of this stuff exists, right? So Drive would include all of those options in terms of docs, sheets, slides, you know, all that. I've done a webinar in district, and you're welcome to you know, visit the site. I have, I'll drop the site in the chat, the website that I created for my district that has, it has all the webinars I've done. I did one a few weeks ago that was really about like tips and tricks in Google Docs specifically, and they were kind of advanced things. But it's a really good one to try, I think. So I'll drop that in the chat too if anybody would be interested. You're always welcome. Anybody's welcome to go back there. They're all recorded, and you can access that and other information all the time. So please feel free to go back and do that. This will be available on DoSpace on the site, I believe. Let's see, how do I access Google Drive on my school MacBook? So Google Drive is just a website. So if you have, I don't know if you have, Beth, you have a Google account with your school, I'm assuming. And so what you would have to do is just sign in to that. Let's see, my screen is still shared. So I'm gonna show you what I do on my, I'm on an iMac at home, but I use my MacBook also. Here's what I do. I use Google Chrome all the time. So I'm in Google Chrome as my browser. And then under people, I have added all of, so this Devin account with the lowercase is my personal account. This one with the uppercase letters is my private, or I'm sorry, my school account. And so I work back and forth between those all the time this way. So if you're using a personal Google account, if you don't have a school Google account, then I bounce back and forth between these two all the time, so that I can access that. And then once I get into that, you know, if I'm signed into my Google account, Google Drive is just a website. It's just a place to go. I don't have to necessarily download anything or any of that. Yeah, so under people, you can add your Gmail account. So if you look at mine here, if I go to people and I go to add person, it's just gonna add a new window and it's gonna have me sign in. It's like a brand new thing. So I have that, you can see that under here, that I have some other practice like accounts that I log into to practice. I want to see things as a student, or I want to see things as, you know, somebody who's not in our staff list, whatever that might be. I've got my basketball account where I sign in for my basketball stuff. So yeah, you can add that in. You can add your personal Gmail account, and it works perfectly. So it's pretty great. And again, I bounce back and forth between those all the time. I'm constantly doing that. I do that on my MacBook Pro as well. You can do it on anywhere that you have. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner, if I was on my Chromebook, which I have too, and I go to the upper right-hand corner and I have, oops, let me move this out of the way. I could add a person here too. So if I was on my Chromebook, I could add another account is actually what it would be. I'll go to my Drive. There we go. I can click here and say add account, and it adds an account this way. This way it gets really confusing. So your computer gets confused and your browser gets confused if you're logged into multiple accounts within the same person. So I don't like doing that as much. That's why on my MacBook or my iMac, I do like to go up to people and add the person, because it's just as easy to flip back and forth. My computer, my browser doesn't get confused. So yeah, that's absolutely what I would do. We'll be uploading. We'll be uploading this to our, that's nuts from DoSpace. Yeah, so any other questions? Anything else that I can show you or help with? Yeah, I'd be happy to answer anything else. Okay. Sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so let me drop the site that I told you I would share, that has all of my webinars that I've done for my district. That again, you're welcome to. That's not right. Hold on, I missed some of it. Don't click that. That's not going to work. There we go. That looks like a link. So that link will take you to the website that I have that has all the webinars I've created and done so far. for my district. Again, there are other ones on there that I will be doing within the coming weeks. I have, I think, 4 more, 2 next week and 2 the week after. And you're welcome to join. I mean, they're open to anybody. You could just click on the sign up place where it has the sign up, and it will take you to a Google form to do that. And so feel free to join. It's a lot of my staff members, but we do that on Google Meet, not on Zoom. So it's just a Google Meet link where you can hop in and do that. And again, you're welcome to join that too. Well, good. If there's anything I can do, Faye, to help, please feel free to reach out. I'm also going to put in, I don't know if this is anywhere, if they put this on the website or anything, but my email address is right there. You can contact me anytime. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. If you're somebody who is on Twitter, for example, this is where you can find me there. I share stuff there too. It's an easy way to connect with me also. So if you want either of those options plus the website, plus just about anywhere else you could think of, you can probably find me there too. So yeah, so I hope everybody has a great rest of your week and weekend. I guess it is Friday. I lose track of the days at this point. But yeah, enjoy your Friday. Looks like the weather is going to be fantastic. Enjoy your weekend, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. So take care, everybody.